in the newsletter. And then Homecoming 250. We're getting ready for the events in October and November. So Navy is October, Marines is November. If you want to do a tour, a Navy themed tour or a Marine themed tour, talk to Mike, talk to Antoinette. They're getting things ready. We have a bunch of people already signed up to do tours on the website. The sooner you get started, the better. You don't have to have it all down yet to start advertising and get people signing up for when they come in the fall. So we have 8 tours on there now, people doing tours. We want to have more. What else? Fixing Philly. That's PHIX, if you want to fix Philly. They had a city council had an event at the Museum of the American Revolution where they got input from people about 2026. Is Philly ready for 2026? Yes, I think the resounding consensus was no. And Ernest, our own Ernest Rouse, was there, who got up and made a comment at the end about what are y'all going to do about restrooms? Big question, as we all know. And the writer for the Inquirer, she was really taken by that. Like, yeah, the boots on the ground are the people who know what needs to be done to make it comfortable for visitors here. So this Stephanie Farr, she's a journalist with the Inquirer. She offered to take suggestions from people. So send them. So if you look in the newsletter, Wendy Stanley agreed to collate all of these suggestions so we can send them in as a group from APT. So maybe we'll get a shout out in the article, or at least to show that like we're the tour guides. Here's what we're saying. You know, we'll collate everybody's suggestions. I'm like, no, Wendy. Yeah, send them to Wendy, and she's going to collate them all together. Yeah, you send them to both of us, so that's fine. Yeah, so Maria already sent in some some suggestions, which is great. But yeah, think about like every little thing, right? This is our chance to be heard. She can't guarantee that anything's going to be done with what she publishes in the newsletter, but at least, or the newspaper. But it's a chance to get all our suggestions out there, and then, city council or whoever will look at them and hopefully do something, at least some of them. If you've noticed, there've already been some bathroom changes. So 5th and Chestnut, it's open 10 to 5, that brick building there across from Independence Hall. And Franklin Square has new restrooms. Thank you, Charlene, for sending in that little blurb about the Franklin Square restrooms. And they're open until 10 o'clock at night. Now, not during the Chinese Lantern Festival, which is like all summer, but anyway. But at least they're there and they're open, right? And they're potentially going to be open until 8, which is great. What else? I sent out a survey, those of you who were at the meeting last month and in February at Christchurch, to give your opinion, on Christchurch versus this place. Pretty much so far, the answers are 50-50. Like literally, I think it's like 48 and 52%, because people love that it's more comfortable here. They can get food. They feel like they can chat with everybody and network more, but they don't like, if you come in late, you're on camera, the bathroom's behind the speaker. They don't like the stairs, but Christchurch is more historic. They've got an elevator, the bathroom's better, but it feels kind of sterile, people said, and there's no food. So it's kind of half and half. And there's no air conditioning, so we're definitely not going there in the summer. And they have fans instead of air conditioning, which is not good for the sound in the room. So summer, we're not going to be there, but I think we'll do a couple times a year. We'll do there probably, but we'll see. People are still responding to the survey, so we'll see what all the answers are. Certification exam is Saturday. So if you are planning to take it, make sure I know today, or like today, probably by midnight, because I got to order the exams tomorrow. Yeah, so I got to order the exams Thursday to have them ready on Friday. What else? Jim's coffee break will be next Tuesday, the 17th, 10 o'clock in the morning. There's a workshop on how to decide if an LLC is right for me. So if you're like a one-person tour company and you book tours directly and you're thinking about forming an LLC, we're going to have a webinar on it on July 1st. It's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is a lot earlier than we normally do, but that was when the person could do it, the accountant could do it. And if you sign up with me, you'll get the recording afterwards too. So even if you can't make it, sign up and we'll send you the recording. It's free. You see, he agreed to do it for free. So July 10th, Annie is sponsoring or organizing a trip to Hagley and Wilmington. So if you want to do that, book club, July 15th. And any of you, I know some of you in the room promised to send me some events. If anyone wants to send me events around town, like if there's something you're going to or you see or you notice, I'm going to send the next one out either Friday morning or Saturday morning. So send me your events. If there's something that you know about, we're going to send it out this weekend. NFTGA insurance, if you didn't get insurance in December, like if you're a newer member that signed up and you want to have insurance, have that extra coverage, the open enrollment is right now for July 1st through December 31st. So it's open until June 29th, and then we'll send it in, and it's the same price as all year, but at least you have an opportunity to sign up now. $85. Shadowing opportunities, we still have some going through June. So if you want to shadow, we have Reed agreed to do some in June. He was away in April and May, but he does architecture tours. So if you want to have that aspect of it, you can sign up with Reed. And Tom Swift, Tom Rosenberg, and Judith Robinson are also still offering tours in June. July meeting, we don't have Mike here today to tell us about it, but it's going to be about Dickinson, John Dickinson. Is that his name, John? John Dickinson, right? Yeah. So we have a speaker that's going to talk about Dickinson in July. Hi, perfect timing. I'm just about done. This is our speaker. Yay. Also in the newsletter, pay attention after we list like the APT events and then corporate member events. There's NFTGA events that you guys can all sign up for. They're free. So this one, I think it's in July, is going to be on 2026 events around the country. So that should be pretty interesting for the semi-quincentennial. And then Visit Philly also has different kinds of technology and kind of webinars and things that are free that you can sign up for. And that's all. Awesome. So our speaker is here. Segal. That is, oh, whatever. Is that correct? Or Segal? Segal, okay. So Mark Segal is our speaker here today. From pioneering history as a participant at the Stonewall Riots to being a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front, New York, 1969 to 71, and founder of Gay Youth, the nation's first organization to deal with bullying and suicide of LGBT youth, to being a marshal and member of the Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day Committee, which created the world's first gay pride in 1970, Mark Segal has been involved in LGBT civil rights since he moved to New York in May 1969. His campaign to end the invisibility of the LGBT community and media had him create the campaign against the TV networks to disrupt live TV shows, including the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and the Today Show with Barbara Walters. Those disruptions changed the media and forced them to start covering LGBT community fairly. As a 5-time Emmy Award winner, Bruce Valanche states, "Before Will and Grace and Ellen, there was Mark Segal." Almost 50 years after he disrupted NBC live broadcasts, today Mark serves on the Joint Diversity Council of Comcast, NBC, Universal to continue to educate the network on LGBT issues. Mark Segal is the founder of the Philadelphia Gay News and past president of both the National LGBT Press Association and the National Gay Newspaper Guild. His memoir was named Best Book by the National LGBT Journalists Association. His weekly syndicated column, Mark My Words, has won numerous awards from the Society of Professional Journalists and the National Newspaper Association. And with no further ado, let's give a nice warm welcome to Mark Segal.
Well, now that you've told my full life, I think I could leave. Thank you. Hi, everybody. First thing I should let you.
We only have one computer here tonight because our 80-person
Oh.
computer. So we printed out those photos you sent.
Oh,
So if you want to hold them up and show them, then we can pass them around.
good. I didn't necessary. I thought you had AV or something. Not necessary. They're not necessary. I am a Philadelphia chauvinist. I love Philadelphia. No, I'm fine. Yeah. I've lived here for quite a lot of years. Let's see. I was born in 1951. So for most of you, that makes me ancient or historic to some extent. But I've been doing what I've been doing for 55 years, which is fighting for equal rights. But being born in 1951, I thought that I was the only person that was like me, being a gay man in Philadelphia, a city of 1.6 million people at that time. That's how invisible people like I was. If I wanted to find out who I was, I would go to the library. And in the library, you might look up homosexual and it'd say, see psychiatry, see religion, see morals. And that didn't seem like me, and I couldn't understand. But I began to understand why I had to be invisible, why I couldn't tell my parents, why I couldn't tell anyone. So all of that is why I'm happy to be here tonight, believe it or not, because what I learned at Stonewall and Gay Liberation Front and doing the campaign against the networks is in order to fight for civil rights, you have to be visible. And I was going to do whatever it took to be visible. And I'm sure most of you here have given tours to Independence Hall. Um, at one point, when I was in my major campaigning for visibility, the Liberty Bell, you might remember, was in Independence Hall. And at one point, I literally went and handcuffed myself to the Liberty Bell. And if any of you have seen the cover of my memoir, there's a picture on the cover, which is of me being arrested. That's me being taken out of Independence Hall. So that's where that picture comes from. And so what I'm trying to say is I fought for visibility for people that are the next generation coming up. And I'm hoping that they have other role models. But one of the things that's great about what you do is you get to take people around Philadelphia and you can show them LGBT role models now because we're no longer invisible, especially here in Philadelphia. I mean, you could take them to see the John Fry historic placard on 13th and Locust, or Barbara Giddings placard, or Philadelphia Gay News placard, or the placard on Independence Mall, which were for the first gay civil rights marches from July 4th, 1965 to July 4th, 1969, preceding Stonewall. There are so many around. You could just do that, stop at those monuments and talk about them. But I thought I'd talk to you about one that you haven't seen yet. So I brought a column I wrote almost 20 years ago. And when I wrote this column, people were not aware of this guy very much in America. But he's someone that we really should start looking at. And we are in Philadelphia. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. So this is a column I wrote of 20 years ago, so I'm going to try to skim it. So in 1777, we were losing the Revolutionary War. We were doing really bad. And so we had an ambassador in Paris who was there for two reasons. Number one, to get money from the French court. And number two, to try to find some military experts that could help Washington, clean up this, army that he had. Well, so he heard of a guy by the name of Baron Wilhelm von Steuben. And he said, okay, let me interview this guy. So von Steuben came to his house and he interviewed him. And he said something a little strange about him. So he went out and investigated a little about him. And he found out that he had to leave Prussia because, wow, he liked guys. Incredible. Well, so Franklin didn't do very much about it. And then things started getting even worse for Washington here in Valley Forge. And so he called him back. And he talked to him a little more. And he said, why don't we take you to America? And you could help General Washington. And he said, von Steuben said at that time, well, there's a slight problem. I might be arrested very shortly by the French police. So in a couple of weeks later, Benjamin Franklin snuck von Steuben out of France on his way to the United States. So this is what makes Benjamin Franklin the father of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So the story I've just told you about von Steuben is one I hope you will use when you go and show your tourist Benjamin Franklin's grave, because it's something that he was very proud of. So if you're wondering, for those of you who don't know who von Steuben was, let me go through this. These are my old notes, literally 20 years old, that I just printed out today. And rather than reading all this, I really did try to. Okay, so when he got here, Washington accepted him immediately. And some of his accomplishments included instituting a moral company for training, establishing sanitary standards, and organizing for the camp and training soldiers in drills tactics such as bayonet fighting and musket loading. In February 1778, on arrival at Valley Forge to serve Washington, he informed Congress of his desire to work as a volunteer for Washington. In March 1778, he began his tenure as Inspector General, drilling troops according to established European military precepts. 1778-79 writes the Regulations for Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States, which becomes a fundamental guide for the Continental Army and remains in active use through the War of 1812. 1788 and 81, senior military officer in charge of troop and supply mobilization in Virginia. 1781, replaced by Marquis de Lafayette as commander in Virginia. 1781-83, continued to serve as Washington's Inspector General and is active in improving discipline and streamlining administration in the Army. Spring 1783, assist in formulating plans for the post-war American military. After the war was over, von Steuben applied for his pension. And he was one of the few people under Washington who the Continental Congress did not give a pension. And when it was asked why, the term was, well, he might not be moral enough. The last letter that General George Washington wrote as commander-in-chief of our Revolutionary Army was to the Continental Congress, saying that General von Steuben is one of the most moral people he knows. Without him, there would be no United States of America. So I could say to you today, without General von Steuben, a gay man, there would be no United States of America. And we need to start recognizing that and much more of gay American history that we haven't to this date. So if any of you here are saying, well, what he says, bunch of bull just now, I will give anybody in this room $10,000 who could stand up and tell me one heterosexual fact about von Steuben. I don't think anybody can. So when I first wrote that article, which has appeared throughout newspapers around the country, at first people started fighting against it. I then did what I just did with you. I offered any academic or historian in the United States who could prove it wrong, I would give $10,000 to their favorite charity. No one got it, to say the least. And today, if you go to the Museum of the American Revolution, you will see a box which talks about von Steuben, and it says most historians believe he was a gay man. So that's something that makes me very proud, because it's something I've been fighting for. And I hope that you will think about all of the LGBT people we've had in history. And when you take them around Philadelphia, especially if you have young people with you, think that maybe one of them someday might be LGBT when they grow up. You could give them some role models. So that's about what I have to say to you. If there's any questions out there from all that, I'm happy to answer. Yes, you in the lovely striped dress.
Hi there, I'm Amy Cobetta. I'm not a tour guide, just a history nerd. Love being here. So, as a lesbian, like I'm interested not necessarily in like finding queer people in the revolution. I'm interested in telling people about queer liberation that happened in Philadelphia. Like, I want to tell our story as well as telling the overarching story that definitely includes people in our community. So I'm wondering, like, where would you start if like somebody came to you and said, what would be like the tour of like the gay and lesbian, well, then it was only gay and lesbian, but like the queer liberation that happened in Philadelphia?
Okay, first place I would start would be at 17th and Chancellor. There used to be a restaurant there called Dewey's. Um, in 1967, 66, sorry. In 1966, gay men and lesbian women were in there after the clubs had closed at 2 in the morning, and they were making a ruckus and they were a little outrageous. And the management said, "We don't allow people like you in here. Please leave." Well, the next day they started picketing that restaurant. That was the first picket for gay rights ever in America. And that happened right here, ever. That happened here in Philadelphia. Next site I would take you to on this lovely little tour would be from 1965, which would be in front of Independence Hall and on the northwest corner of 6th and Chestnut is a marker which talks about the marches for homosexual equality that took place every July 4th from 1965 until 1969 outside Independence Hall. And in those few years, the largest group they ever got was 100, which made it the largest demonstration of its time. It was somewhere between 40 and 100. Then from there, I would take you probably to see 13th and Locust, see the John Fry placard at 13th and Locust. John Fry was a psychiatrist, and up until 1973, the American Psychiatric Association always considered homosexuality a mental illness. He was a psychiatrist, and he was afraid that if he let everyone know he was a psychiatrist, he would lose his credentials if they knew he was homosexual. Therefore, he kept it quiet. But at their convention in 1973, he put to prove his point, he put a mask on and spoke to the American Psychiatric Association. And at that convention, they started to erase the rules about homosexuality being a mental disturbance. From there, I might take you to see the placard for Barbara Giddings, who was part of that 1973 Psychiatric Association convention. But also, she was a spokesperson for the American Library Association's LGBT organization, which goal was to get more books into libraries about our community. And that might seem very little to you, but remember I said when I was a kid, I went to the library and where it said "see homosexual"? Guess what? When I did do that, I only found 5 books, and they were all in those departments I mentioned. So Barbara's idea was to get books for and about us in the libraries. So how's that for a tour so far? Okay. Then I would go over to Ben Franklin's grave and tell the von Steuben story and show how we've been a part and parcel of history all along. And there's some, then you can go to the Philadelphia Gay News plaque, which is also at 13th and Locust, 11th and Locust, where our original office was. And we're historic because next March we will celebrate our 50th anniversary. So we have one of the longest running LGBT newspapers in the country here in Philadelphia. So I'll expand a little to Pennsylvania if I can. Is that okay with you? Because as I said, I'm a proud Philadelphian. I'm also a proud Pennsylvanian. And when I put all this together, I believe that we've done more for LGBT rights here in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania than any other state or city. And that includes New York, San Francisco, and LA. And let me expand upon a little about that. So in 1973, I decided that there wasn't enough, we weren't visible enough. So, as you said, um, I went on a campaign to create more visibility on TV networks, disrupting TV shows. So today, when you watch TV and you see Will and Grace, or Anderson Cooper, or Rachel Maddow, that campaign started here in Philadelphia. So I think that's a real important thing. That led me to meet with a governor of Pennsylvania, a man by the name of Milton Schaap, in 1975. And Milton Schaap asked me, well, what can I do for the LGBT community? And I said, well, first thing to do is issue an executive order for non-discrimination. And in 1975, Pennsylvania became the first state to have any non-discrimination law, thanks to Milton Schaap. He then followed that up with creating a commission to look into the problems of the gay and lesbian community. First state anywhere in the nation. He created liaisons, LGBT liaisons, between the department and his office to make sure the changes that need to be made were done. So today, if you see any commission from a mayor or governor or even a president on LGBT rights, thank Governor Milton Schaap here in Pennsylvania. If you see LGBT liaisons, thanks Milton J. Schaap. All of it started here in Pennsylvania. So if you put all that together, let's see, non-discrimination, psychiatry, television networks and media, we've done more than almost anyone else in the country. So when I say I'm a proud Philadelphian, I mean it sincerely, because it speaks to me not only as a Philadelphian, but as a gay man. Yes, sir.
Mark, didn't you have a lot to do with the John Anderson
Yes,
apartments?
yes.
Can you talk about that?
Again, another first in the nation. So as I'm getting old, I've told you I'm old, right? I'm 74 years old. So part of my history is when I was 18 years old, feeling that I was the only person in Pennsylvania, I guess, who was gay. I moved to New York to find other people like me. That's how I got involved in Stonewall Riots, Gay Liberation Front, so forth, and wanted to create more visibility. And 15, 20 years ago, I was back in New York visiting my friend Jerry Hughes, who was also a member of Gay Liberation Front. And I noticed that as he was becoming a senior, he lived on a fifth floor walk up in the village in New York. And when it rained in his apartment because it was a top floor and the owner of the building wouldn't repair the building because he wanted him to move out so he could redo the apartment and raise rents. And I heard about this happening to a lot of other older gay people. And I thought, that, this is a little difficult. What do we do about it? Then I heard about LGBT people who've been in affordable housing, one couple, which I still know, a lesbian couple who were together for 30 years, and one of the members had an apartment in the building, and the apartment management wouldn't let her partner stay overnight. Yeah, another gay man who in the evening, if he went down to the community room, the workers in the building would get around him and try to pray the gay out of him. So I figured, okay, there are other senior affordable buildings. Why don't we do one? And I didn't realize that was a revolutionary thought at the time. But I thought, well, gee, the Black community has it. The Latino community has one. There's one for the Asian community. Why not one for us? And so I looked at the ways those communities did their buildings, and I used that same formula. But we had to fight. And the first thing we had to fight was, even though there are Presbyterian homes, there are Catholic charity homes, when I wanted to put LGBT senior affordable housing, they said that was discriminatory. So if you go to the John C. Anderson building now, you will see one of the few times in my life I've ever given in to a battle. Instead, it says John C. Anderson, LGBT friendly senior affordable building. So we added the word friendly in there. And so the key word there is, I like to say that we don't discriminate against heterosexuals. but we were the first one in the nation. It was a almost a $20 million budget. It became a Barack Obama White House champion project. And I'm happy it's open and I'm done with it. It was a major, probably one of the biggest projects I've ever done in my life. But there now are 20 others around the country that copied that plan. Again, Philadelphia, there's a magic about Philadelphia. Yes.
Can you say more about some of the historic characters in the LGBTQ community in Philadelphia, like Charlotte Cushman, possibly James Buchanan?
Cushman, I'd have to read the article. It was in my paper to remember all the facts. But Buchanan, I can a lot. I love LGBT history, and I specifically love it when it matches American history. And a long time ago, I did a TV show where there were some right of center people, shall we say, on the other side. And as we're talking, one of the people looked at me and pointed his finger at me and said, "This country wasn't founded for people like you." So that made me do the research, which made me found von Steuben. But along the way, I also found other characters, which are really interesting. And one of the characters was President Buchanan. So the story goes that Buchanan, a lifelong bachelor, was heartbroken when his girlfriend died when he was 21, and he vowed never to see another woman in his life. That's the story. If you go to the Buchanan House in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that's the story you will hear. The reality is that he lived for many years with a man by the name of Francis Key, who was a senator from, I forget which, a southern state. And it was written about the two of them that they were boyfriends, and, oh, there was a key line. I'm sorry. Yeah, Nancy's, but there was another term that Mr. and Mrs. Buchanan was written about in the newspaper, literally in the newspapers in Washington, D.C. And when they each died, their correspondence between each other was burned. None of their other correspondence to anybody else was burned, only to each other. And both families did it. I'll let you do that.
From what I've read about her, and what interested me in her was Sully's portrait of her, which she even said was extremely flattering. And looking at photographs of her, I would agree, was that she actually had an affair with Thomas Sully's daughter. And she was actually known for portraying a lot of the male roles. Like she played in Romeo opposite her sister as Juliet. Other than that, I haven't really researched a whole lot of it, but I found it really interesting that she did have an affair with Thomas Sully's daughter. And then Sully painted her portrait, and she said to him, like, "Wow, this is a really flattering, and she even acknowledged it." And if you look at photographs of her, at the risk of sounding somewhat impolitic, she kind of looked like a dog who chased parked cars.
I know we've done features on her, and so if you go to EPGM, which is Electronic Philadelphia Gay News, and type in her name, I'm sure you'll find a lot there. But I just don't recall any of it. Yeah. Gotta wait for that microphone.
Talking stick here. So you said you disrupted all the TV programs. Tactically, like how did you approach that and how did you execute it?
Well, each one was different. So the first one, I think I did about 5 of them. The first one we did was here in Philadelphia, Channel 6, and their 11 o'clock news. none of you, I think, know any of the anchors we did it with, but that was Larry Kane was and Jim O'Brien was the sportscaster. So Larry Kane wrote about it in his memoir, but he embellished it a little. The only problem that day at all was that the sportscaster got his makeup on my jacket. That was the only problem of that evening. Second one I did was the Today Show, NBC. And to get entry into the Today Show, the night before, we took the tour of 30 Rock, NBC, that's given. We made sure we were on the last tour. And as the tour was winding down, we literally discovered a closet and hid in the closet. And at a little and a little after 6 in the morning, we left the closet. And thanks to the NBC tour, we knew exactly where the studio was and made our way to the studio and disrupted the Today Show. And I was brought out by security to the hallway. And a woman came out with a notepad and said, "Tell me what you did and why you did it." And, and she's writing, and she's asking questions. And a guy comes out and says, "You're on the air, get in there." And she said, "Not until I get this story." That woman was Barbara Walters. And Barbara Walters and that story became the first time that any network reported on a gay demonstration. Yeah. Yeah, yay for Barbara. The one that's most famous is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And for that, my Philadelphia roots take hold again. We got some Temple University stationery and wrote that we were radio, film, and television students at Temple University, and we'd like to come and watch a taping so we could do our thesis on how they do the CBS Evening News. And they invited us. So on November 3rd, 1973, I think it was, Walter Cronkite was reading a story about security procedures when I slipped between him and the camera and held a sign into the camera's lens, which says "Gays Protest CBS Prejudice." And I yelled it at the same time. When a bunch of stagehands came and threw me to the floor, started wrapping me in cables, and the CBS network went blank for 7 minutes. The next day, my attorney went in and subpoenaed Walter Cronkite for the trial, since I was arrested and faced 10 years imprisonment and a $10,000 fine. This was for breaking FCC Federal Communications rules. A few months later, we found ourselves at 100 Center Street at the trial. First half of the trial went pretty well, with the prosecuting attorney putting his case on, saying how horrible and radical I was and what have you. And we had to take a break in the trial because they were going to set up a projector to show what I had done on the CBS Evening News. That's how they did it those days. So I'm in the hallway talking to my lawyer, Al Wiener, and I feel a tap on my shoulder. I turn around and the man says, "You must be Mark Segal." I look at him and said, "You must be Walter Cronkite." He said, very seriously, he said, "Why did you do what you did?" And I said, "Because your show is biased." And he took umbrage to that, and I could see it in his face. And I said, "If I prove it to you, will you change it?" He didn't say a word. I said, "Well, let's see. A few weeks ago, you did a story on 5,000 women walking up Fifth Avenue proclaiming International Women's Year." He said, "Yes, that was news." I said, "So why don't you report it when 15,000 gay men and lesbian women walk up 6th Avenue proclaiming gay pride?" That's bias. He didn't say anything. I said, "Last week, you did your first news report on the gay community ever. You reported on the third time that the New York City Council had refused to pass a gay rights bill." He said, "That's news." I said, "Yes, you're right. It is news. But why didn't you report on the 25 other cities that have passed gay rights laws?" That's bias. He said nothing, turned around, walked back into the courtroom. Next up was Walter to testify. And the first question from the prosecutor was, "Mr. Cronkite, when these people trespassed into your studio, And he said, excuse me, they didn't trespass. We invited them. Now, I was still found guilty, but I got a $200 fine. Oh, and Walter and I became friends, which was even better, which is better than the Zap. Yeah, you had something. Oh, microphone. Do you want this one?
Yeah, I've been there. So one of the best and tragic pieces of media about Philadelphia is the movie Philadelphia. I want to know what was the gay community's reaction to that movie? Did they have any input on it? And what do you think about it? Has it really held up to this day in a lot of ways?
Well, the story is true. And the lawyer who is gay, who in the film is not gay, so that's not true. But the lawyer who defended him, who's still in practice, by the way, here in Philadelphia, advised on the film. So for the most part, the film is accurate. And the community, I think, felt a great debt of gratitude to the film, since before that we had Ronald Reagan, who wouldn't even say the word HIV or AIDS, and held up research for many years. And because of Ronald Reagan, hundreds of thousands of people died. Yeah. Oh, and one last thing. I do have a copy of the final script for Philadelphia, and I have the signatures of everybody who was in the film. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of neat.
So I had two.
I remembered your question.
I remembered. I knew that they always come back. One was if you could tell us a little about Barbara Giddens, because I think she's very important for tour guides to know about. So if you could just share a little about her. And then secondly, I was wondering, I read that you're a consultant with the Stonewall National Park in New York, and I'm wondering just your thoughts on, with the current administration, what the future of that park is looking like.
Good question. First question, I think I've answered, where she was, her two major things she did in her life was be with Dr. Fry at the Psychiatric Association and the American Bar Association. She also was a very eloquent speaker. So those are the three things I would say about her. The other one is more relevant to today. And it's a mishmash. So I am the curator of the Stonewall National Monument Visitor Center. The Visitor Center, if any of you know New York, there is the Stonewall Bar, and right next door to it is now the Visitor Center. The two entities combined was the original Stonewall. The bar that's there now is a recreation, not the original. And so when they decided to do it, to build the Visitor Center, they went looking around for somebody who was there, who might know something about it, and who had documented proof from the period of time. It turns out that I'm the only one, or the last one living. So I became the curator, and if you go up, and I hope you do go to visit it, it's a wonderful building. And on the wall, we tell the story of Stonewall. And what we did, which I'm very proud of, is we let the people who were at Stonewall speak for themselves. And the story of Stonewall is told by them rather than anyone else. And that was very important to me, because there are a lot of myths about Stonewall, and they all started from a journalist for the Village Voice who wasn't from our community and who was friends with Inspector Pine, who did the raid. So you could figure out very quickly that our history has been manipulated. And so we try to get back our own history in the Visitor Center. So the Visitor Center is not owned by the government, but the monument, which is approximately 6 blocks around Stonewall, is. And so one of the things that the National Park Service did under the current administration is anywhere that there was LGBT and Q, the current administration took off the T and the Q. So if you look at this story of the Stonewall National Monument, it will have LGB. Now, I'm a living witness to that history, and I guarantee you there were trans people there. And I won't let them erase that. And so in that regard, I'm personally partnering with, and I'm now called a ambassador for change with the National Parks Conservancy Association. And so I've been going around the country telling the story about Stonewall and who we were and why we did what we did, which is what I told you a little about, which is I don't want to be invisible anymore. Yeah. I want to be able to turn on my TV and see people like me. Yeah, those things are important. I even want to be able to read a book and read a love story about, people like me. So, and we're able to do that today. I mentioned that when I started life, there were 5 books in the library. If I go to a library today, depending on which library I go to, there might be hundreds. There could be thousands. Go to Amazon and just, type in LGBT books. You'd be amazed. I mean, I have a memoir. This will be a plug. And then I danced, traveling the road to LGBT equality. And when it first came out, I was #1. I was an Amazon bestseller. Yay! But the book's now been out for 10 years. And so they put numbers where you are on their list. And LGBT books, I'm like at about 5,000. Now, you'd think I'd be very depressed. I'm only 5,000 on this list, but I'm very proud to be 5,000. That means there are 4,999 other books that people from my community could buy and read and learn about themselves. That's a good thing. And that's how we've changed the world in 55 years. 55 years. We've done it all in 55 years. This month, actually, this Gay Pride. We're celebrating 55th anniversary of Gay Pride this year. In that case, you know more about my life than you need to know. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
I would just ask, could you do us one more? Tell us. I would love to hear. I don't have your book. I'm going to buy your book. But tell us about Stonewall, like from your personal experience, like just a little what it was like being part of that.
I don't think you have any pictures of what I looked like when I was 18. But trust me, I was adorable. I looked like the boy next door. The hair's gone. Yeah, that is me. That is me. That's me in 1972. But 1969, I had short hair. I did literally look like the all-American boy next door. And I moved to New York because I wanted to find my community. And May 10th, 1969. And there were no neon signs this way to the gay people. But I went to the village and eventually found Christer Street, which was the heart of the gay community in those days. And typically what we would do as teenagers was just hang out. And for gay teenagers, what we did was walk up and down Christer Street all night long, talking about whatever teenagers talk about. But at the end of the night, we always went to Stonewall. And you went to Stonewall for one reason and one reason only. In a city of 6 million people, it was the only place where gay people could dance, hug, kiss, hold hands. Out on the street, Christer Street, where was our street basically, people from the boroughs might come in and beat you up or harass you. The police might harass you or more likely arrest you. But in that bar, a bar that was illegal, mafia owned, dirty, sold watered down drinks, we felt safe. At least we thought we felt safe until June 28th, 1969. That night, the police came barging through the front doors, started throwing things against the wall, throwing people up against the wall, taking bottles from the bar and throwing them at people, destroying the bar, destroying the jukebox, destroying the soda machine, yelling names, hurling things. I was frightened. I just from Philadelphia, 6 weeks earlier, never seen anything like this in my life before. Thought in my head was, gee, I better call the police. These were the police who were doing this. And I think that's one of the deepest depressions I've ever had in my life, was realizing how low society thought of us. But I was very lucky. I got outside, went across the street, just stood there, and started watching as the crowd grew around the doors. And then eventually the police wanted to leave after they'd done all the damage they could do. And when they came out the door, we started throwing things at them. Could be a coin in your pocket, could be a little stone, could have been an empty can of Coke. And they retreated. This happened about 3 different times. And about that same time, my friend Marty Robinson came up to me. He's an LGBT pioneer hero. And gave me a piece of chalk and said, Mark, I want you to go up and down Crystal Street and write tomorrow night Stonewall. And I became an activist. I didn't even know what an activist was, but I was one. And that second night we turned out, and Marty and Martha Shelley spoke from the steps of the closed Stonewall. And we then organized Gay Liberation Front. And 30 days later, we had a first demonstration march from Washington Square to Stonewall. We were on that street leafleting every single night. We had leaflets that said, okay, if you get into a legal problem, here's people you can call. If you have medical issues, you need to have attention, here's a place you could go. We then demonstrated against media. We did a demonstration against the police, which is where I got my first arrest. We demonstrated against the Village Voice, created the first trans organization, first youth organization. So I mentioned earlier that here in Philadelphia, we had those marches outside Independence Hall, which were 40 to 100 people at the most. They wanted to assimilate into society. We in Gay Liberation Front didn't want to assimilate. We wanted to be our true, authentic selves. So after creating a lawyers organization, a medical organization, a youth organization, a trans organization, a community center, at the end of the first year, to mark that first year, what we had built, which was a community that never existed before, and also remember Stonewall, we held what we call Crystal Street Liberation Day, which is the first gay pride. That was in 1970. And so from that 100 people, we became 15,000 that day. 15,000 people marched. Today, when you look at gay pride, the following year might have been 50, 100,000, 200,000. This month alone, across the world, millions will celebrate pride. And it all started from that building. Yeah.
All right, so next I know Rich Armandi wanted to talk a little about, actually right where we are across the street, there was a Ben Franklin plaque on the wall that has been stolen, probably for scrap metal. And the area in general is just very seedy. There's a lot of homeless people and feces, and there were people that used to be there and clean it up, but they're afraid to go there now. And so he's been starting this initiative to kind of get it cleaned up, get the plaque replaced. So he wants to tell you about it. And maybe we can get like a committee together of people to help him and kind of lobby to get this, like they're doing a lot of work 2nd Street to 5th Street, and then a lot of work on the waterfront, but they're kind of leaving this block of like front to 2nd so that nobody's doing anything with, right? Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It makes more sense to kind of have everything be contiguous, right? So Rich is going to tell you that. You can put the PowerPoint on Zoom, and then because we only have the one computer, we have them printed out so we can, you can kind of mention which, or maybe you could hold it up, and at the end we could pass it around. Okay, well, you pass it around first. So welcome. So first, let's give a nice warm round of applause to Mark for his wonderful presentation. all the work he has done to make society better. And also warm welcome to Rich. Thank you.
I have it on my phone, yes.
Let me know when you go to the next slide.
Okay. You can probably go start on next slide now.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Excuse my raspy voice. My radiologist took care of my vocal cords a few years back, and he's just been getting worse. Okay. The plaque that I'm speaking about was a plaque that was put up in 1961 by the Society of Professional Journalism. And it was because right across the street was where Ben Franklin put up his first print shop at 131 Market Street. That this block is very historic and not very many people know about it, but Franklin lived on this block 3 different times in his professional career before he got into politics and before he went to France. And then when he came back, they built a house up on 4th Street, Franklin Court. But his early years, where a lot of significant historic events took place, were right across the street. Now, for the last, I've been trying to get more notification or memorialization is what I've been calling it for this area for about 3 years. I applied to Leave a Legacy program at Philly 250 and in 2023, and that was shot down. And since then, I've been telling anybody who wants to listen about the research that I've done on this block and what's here. The problem is the city doesn't own any of that real estate across on the north side. It's owned by Patriot Parking, Department of Transportation, and SEPTA. So you've got 3 conglomerates that own that section, and not much interest in any historical activities. So the plaque was the only marker that was there. And the plaque, I said, was put up in 61 by the Professional Journalists Society. And on the plaque, very apropos to what we're talking about and nowadays, was a plaque for where Franklin first called for Americans to have a free press and for people to be able to express their opinions, their political and religious opinions, and express those different points of view in the press. It was something that he wrote about in his Pennsylvania Gazette, and the Journalist Society recognized that area as being the first site where that Pennsylvania Gazette was printed at 131. There's a picture that's going around, if you haven't seen it, so it'll show you exactly where the plaque was, so that if you go look at it now, you'll see a blank spot where the tile has been broken off and the brass plaque has been hammered off the wall and probably sold for scrap, as Marianne said. So right now, I've been working with SEPTA, and I finally got somewhere with Wendy Green from SEPTA, who I've sent all the information to, and she's trying to set up some meetings with the Journalist Society because they've agreed to replace the plaque, but they're a little leery about putting the plaque in the same spot, figuring that it might get vandalized again. So what we're looking at now is I came up with an idea to, if you look a little bit east of the area right there, SEPTA also owns that green space right across the street. There's trees there and some bushes. That is a ventilation shaft area for the subway. Air gets pulled down in through those grates and exhausted. And that's why the homeless are sleeping there, because it's a very warm place in the wintertime, because the hot air grates are perfect for them to shelter themselves. So since 2007, till just a couple of years ago, a fellow by the name of Joe Shivo and his wife, who is an old-time, old Philly resident and used to own an electric store up on 2nd Street, him and his wife have been taking care of that area. SEPTA doesn't maintain it. Joe and his wife have cut the grass, have watered it, have trimmed the trees, and have cleaned that green space up because it was always a mess. Well, 2 years ago, Joe and his wife had to stop doing it. He told me it was just unsafe. The homeless are there. There's hypodermic needles all over. It's a mess. and it's a very seedy area. So Joe and his wife stopped taking care of it, and you can see it now. It's pretty well overgrown and not taken care of. So it's just not very inviting for any tourist. They'd even want to go to Christchurch or venture down to Penn's Landing. It's just it's a bad spot that people avoid. So what I suggested to SEPTA is that we take that green space and we put a mural wall in the back spot of the mural space, leaving that ventilation shaft area clear in the back, put cyclone fence around that so maintenance can still get to the ventilation areas. But the mural wall, and then I've been talking to the Mural Society about applying to them about doing a mural of how Ben Franklin's shop looked back in 1727 when he opened it there. And then there would be a historical area. We can build it into the mural where we could put plaques of the events that happened there. Like his electrical experiments with the kite were done he lived across the street. His work with Franklin stove and all his heat work and HVAC work was done with the first two versions of the Franklin stove were designed and built right across the street. The Library of Philadelphia Library Company he started when he lived across the street. The Junto clubs that he had across the street. So and here's where I need some help. I'd like to identify all of the historic events that happened in the 12 or 14 years that he lived at one of those three locations, and make sure that we build it. We talk to the artist. If this gets approved by SEPTA and SEPTA's agreeable, first of all, it'll take care of one seedy problem for them. And it'll also create an area where tour guides and everybody else can start taking people to showcase what happened here. I don't want to take anything away from Franklin Court, because that's when, when they did the Continental Congress and meeting with George Washington and all of those events happened up on the 300 block. But there's a lot of events that happen here that are very key to American history. And I think it needs to be memorialized in some way. So I'm asking the APT to partner with me. I'm an old man that has very limited capabilities to do something like this, but I have a desire to work with a group. I've been talking to fundraisers, the Independent Trust of Philadelphia, and they're interested possibly to get some funding, because if SEPTA says, yeah, we can do it, but we can't afford to do it, then we're going to have to do a fundraiser. Friends of Franklin, there's a lot of organizations around the city. I'm sure you people know a lot more of them than I know. And if we can appeal to them to start funding if we need that, and just get ground root support for this to happen. The only formal I went to Mark Segal, the city councilman, and he's all in favor of the idea, said that he would have the city dedicate some money towards it. So he's in approval. We have everybody that I talk to thinks it's a good idea. I just need to get some grassroots support and continue to working with SEPTA and the people who are involved in that area, and see if we can get something done. The pictures, there's a picture of I photoshopped a potential mural wall and how it would look. And I don't know the size of the wall yet and everything. We have to work with architects and design that, and work with the Mural Society to find out whether the original property was three-story structure. It was a three-story structure. And I have the dimensions of that. I have gotten a lot of that information about insurance records of the property. But we can share that with an artist and see what kind of renderings you come up with. So there's a lot of work to be done to pull all the pieces together and hopefully turn the 100 block into a site that we're proud to take people instead of avoiding in our tours. Any questions?
Just as you were talking, it made me think about the item we were discussing earlier about Stephanie Farr from the.
I've already talked to her.
Something to add to the list.
Yeah, I've already sent her. I have a summary and I have my appeal to SEPTA, two different documents where these pictures come from. And I've talked, Marianne told me, and I saw it in the newsletter about Fixing Philadelphia. And her name's Stephanie Farr. I've talked to her and I've sent her the information. So that's hopefully it'll make her list. Any other questions? Yes.
Have you started working with any artists on concepts or designs? Just
No, I haven't. I've contacted the Mural Art Society, and they have an application process, which I'm familiar with. But I haven't moved any farther with that until I get SEPTA to tell us that, you know, they will support a project to renovate that area. It's their property, and unless we get approval from SEPTA to move forward, I really have just made contact with these other organizations, but I really can't go forward. The SEPTA right now, the SEPTA is trying to get the Journalist Society, who's agreed to replace the plaque, in on a meeting. But I want to meet with their architects and engineering groups first to find out whether they will allow such a renovation to go on in that project. Yes.
Bill News asks, is there an estimated cost to your project?
No estimated cost. I was in the facilities business, so I'm pretty understand projects like this. I'm estimating somewhere between 250, 300,000. You probably can get to pull this off, depending on because right now you're looking at a concrete wall. There's already a concrete area, so we'd have to dig a footer and put a foundation wall up. The other cost would have to be, we would have to make sure that security and some type of alarm systems to protect obviously the mural and to protect that ventilation area so no one tries to break into that. So there's some security issues and some alarm issues. But in terms of construction, I just, you know, ballpark, anywhere from 250 to 500,000, I think should cover it. So you're not talking about a very big project. When I first submitted this in 2023 to Philadelphia 250, the project was a little bit grander. I was looking at putting a mural wall on the side of the ramp that comes from Penn's Landing, the whole block. And my idea then was to recreate the whole block and put a mural wall right on that south side of the ramp that comes off of Penn's Landing. It was a much bigger project, but that Leave a Legacy program had funding, and they were going to fund all of these projects in preparation for the semi-quincentennial. So, but since that was not approved, I scaled it down to just a 70-foot wall that we can drop right into that SEPTA green space. And it's a smaller project. And I think we can probably, if we get enough people working on it and we get the approvals we need, we can get that project ready for 4th of July next year. It's not that big a deal, structurally anyway. Any questions? So if you're interested, talk to Marianne, myself. I'm phillytown76.com is my website. You'll see a Boogie Ben's blog that has a whole story about my work across the street. And you can get a hold of me there, or Marianne's got my number.